Hello everyone, today I'll tell you about how my foundation was poured. The amount of concrete needed for the pour was about 9 cubic meters. It's also always recommended to order a little extra concrete just in case, because everyone makes mistakes and sometimes you end up a bit short. To prevent issues before the pour, it's safer to be cautious. To make the pour a bit cheaper, you need all the concrete to fit into one mixer, since that much concrete weighs many tons. It couldn't reach my place, it would get stuck at the entrance. I have already had experience with a gravel truck that got stuck on its axles right here, and there was even more concrete and the truck was much heavier. I could have gone through the trouble of making trays, but it would have been a huge hassle, because on one side of the road, from the edge of the road to the edge of the formwork, it was 11 meters, and on the other side, from the edge of the road to the edge of the formwork, it was also 11 meters. At the same time, the trays would have to be made at least 12 meters long. Making a 12-meter tray is not a great idea. It's possible, but first of all it's labor intensive, and secondly it's expensive because I didn't have materials for these trays and would have to buy them. I could have bought third-grade boards, but they're still not cheap. The money would still have to be spent somewhere, and you'd have to pour something from the tray, so it's not that convenient. I had a choice, either to pour it myself with my own hands or to look for hired workers. Since the foundation is one of the most critical parts of building a house, I decided that I would pour the foundation myself. To make the work easier, I hired a concrete pump. I was quoted a price range for the pump from 18,000 to 25,000 rubles for 5 hours of work. The average price for concrete in the suburbs of St. Petersburg is about 4,500 rubles per cubic meter of concrete. I used B25. There were a lot of problems with the concrete order. I'll talk about that in another video. In the end, even though there's a concrete plant just 30 kilometers from our city, they delivered the concrete from St. Petersburg. Both the concrete and the concrete pump came from St. Petersburg. They had to travel 130 kilometers to reach me. And in the end, it turned out to be cheaper than getting it from the plant that's just 30 kilometers away from us. It turned out not because the concrete was bad or something was wrong with it, but simply because we didn't have a mixer for that volume and we would have had to use 2 mixers. Accordingly, I would have had to pay for delivery twice. The foundation required about 9 cubic meters of concrete, plus some extra as a reserve. Plus, you have to keep in mind that about 0.7 cubic meters are used up by the concrete pump because some concrete stays in the boom. The concrete pump had a 24-meter boom, and it could deliver the concrete very far. It could reach all the way to the end of the site. Since I knew there would be leftovers, I planned to use them for concreting. So I ordered a little more than necessary, and the total volume was 10.5. There were 4 people at the pouring. Friends, thank you so much for your help, much respect. We poured the foundation using a concrete pump. In 35 minutes I had continuous filming, and the entire foundation pouring along with smoothing took exactly 35 minutes. To spread the concrete I used this kind of homemade mop, as well as a regular scoop shovel, and for leveling I used this tool. The bottom is made from a medium density fiberboard panel from an old cabinet to make it very smooth. I couldn't find a trowel for rent. There are special trowels that allow you to make the foundation surface perfectly flat and get a finished base. so that you can immediately lay the finished floor. In my case, you can see here where I went over it, and you can see the lines from how I pressed the strip with my leveling tool, and here along the edge you can see the marks from it. A strip. Overall it turned out pretty even. There are minor bumps, but you could likely lay a finished floor directly on this if you wanted. If, for example, you're planning to have a tile floor like here in the bathroom, then basically all these uneven spots could be leveled out with tile adhesive just by applying a slightly thicker layer. I also rented a vibrator for pouring. With a vibrator the concrete spreads much better. Also, people often just poke the foundation with rebar. This is called schurfing, to get rid of air bubbles. With a vibrator, this process is much faster, more efficient, and more effective. Most importantly, you get much better bonding between the rebar and the concrete spreads much better across the surface. Renting the vibrator cost 1,500 rubles per day. After pouring the foundation, we immediately started pouring the driveway. I didn't make the formwork in advance, and from my own experience I saw firsthand what it's like when you have a good base set by a laser level and the formwork is set perfectly level. How easy is it to pour with the driveway? We struggled with ones that were 10 times smaller, spent just as much time because none of the formwork was level. They just put up boards and the boards turned out to be crooked. It was a real hassle. At the same time, we put in just as much effort for a much larger area. I tried to level it with the same care. At the same time, the driveway turned out crooked. The difference between the foundation and the driveway is huge, but the effort that I and the guys put in was the same. What is proper good preparation? The leftover concrete and the concrete pump boom were used for the driveway. There is a pump that pumps it all back, and the concrete pump has a receiving hopper and it can drain this hopper from below. And he also poured all of that into the driveway. The whole process took just over an hour. The foundation pouring itself took exactly 35 minutes, and about the same amount of time was spent on the driveway. Pouring with a concrete pump is much easier compared to carrying the concrete from the mixer by hand. I came to the conclusion that the concrete pump was worth the money because with trays we would have really struggled here. Now let's talk about the money. I spent around 200,000 rubles on the foundation. That's an estimate since I bought all the rebar at once for the foundation, lintels and reinforced belt. You also need to keep in mind that this amount includes concreting the driveway because the materials left over from the foundation were used for the driveway. The area of the foundation along the outer edges was 61 square meters. The actual labor costs for the foundation work were 97 man-hours of pure working time. In fact, I spent a month on the foundation. My total expenses by the time the foundation was finished amounted to this much. And now behind me you can see that the walls have arrived, so things are going to get a lot more interesting. So subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next videos. If you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment. Thank you all for watching.